Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Graystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Graystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, guys. Hope you've had a good week so far. Hope the hay fever hasn't got you too much. It's got me this week, but won't go on about that. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, this is the number one podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. And if this is the first time you're listening, as always, go back to number one. You're going to be best off starting there and working your way through. Every week we get people saying, I started at number one, I've binged the whole lot, binged 10 episodes, and it really is in order, so I recommend that you go back. However, you will get, you'll get a couple of nuggets, hopefully, from each episode, but I do recommend you start at the beginning. So, this week's episode was really inspired by a quote that I heard from Warren Buffett. Now, Warren Buffett has been someone who I've studied for many, many years. Warren Buffett, Benjamin Graham. And recently I remembered a quote of him saying that when it comes to business, so when it comes to your business is a short-term voting machine and a long-term weighing machine. Okay, and I'll explain a little bit about what he means by that and how he thinks in terms of longevity, scalability, and really how some businesses are worth more than others in the long term, okay? Because when they go to sell, then there's got to be a value on that thing, right? So when he says your business is a short-term voting machine, what he actually means there is that's where you kind of see the value of your business or the value you're putting out or your brand or whatever it might be, your product or service, is all a perception of others, right? So it's what others perceive the value of your service or business to be. Okay, and over a long period of time, so the short period of time is kind of the get-rich-quickers, the shiny object, it's whatever people are chasing and whatever they see to be of high value in that moment of time. And it's really kind of irrelevant as to a value of your business in the short term, as you know. Over the long term, that's where you kind of separate the kids from the adults, right? And that's where your business becomes a weighing machine. And what dictates the weight of that machine in the long term is how much value you've provided to the world, how many people you've served, to what degree you've served them, who's talking about your business, who's talking about your brand, who's talking about your products and services, and how that is the value of your business. It's ultimately how many people you're serving and by what quantity. And take Amazon, for example, right? That's why Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world. So the question is, how do you weigh a lot, right? How do you weigh a lot on the weighing machine? And the reason I wanted to put that first is because the reason these businesses that weigh a lot in the long term is because they've got people who are thinking long term, okay? And the vision in their mind, their visions are scalable because of the horizons of space and time in their mind. They can see much further into the future. They're thinking about the long term. They're thinking about the next 5 years, 10 years all the time. And they're thinking about much bigger picture. And they're focusing on what they do best in that time. So this podcast is for everyone who wants to live an inspired life and do things that are meaningful and fulfilling whilst being rewarded at the same time. That's when we live a truly inspired life. And I've seen lots of people over the duration of this pandemic lockdown creating content on social media. right? Which is awesome. And there's business owners creating content, and there's people who are just coming onto the social media content scene, if you like. And there's even big, huge businesses that are starting to pump out social media, content. But I want to kind of use this podcast to shift your paradigm slightly when it comes to content creation and when it comes to service and income, and how a different focus can lead to majorly different results. And that is that if you want to be a visionary and you want to scale and you don't want to be limited and you want to reach, everyone, and you want to be able to scale your income to a level that gets you way above the average rate, okay, and live an extraordinary life, you need to be taking on tasks that are at least 3 times the average of the GDP. Okay, and I'll explain what I mean about that. So GDP is a measurement, okay, and it's all income earned by all factors of production, which is land, labour, capital and management. So here in the UK, every year they do a measurement, and here in the UK, I think last year it was about 2.8 trillion. 2.8 trillion, right? Now, when you divide that by the 68 million people that live in the UK, so 68 million is the population, say, okay, when you divide it by that, it means that for every single human being in the UK, we're producing about £42,000 worth per year. Okay, so there's a GDP of 42k per year per person. Now, this also dictates how the world works in terms of economy, tax, rent, living costs. And I've been over this before, where I said kind of the whole world is controlled by, say, 500 to 1,000 families, and they dictate all of that stuff. And the GDP is kind of a measurement of how all this stuff's dictated, right? So it keeps people where they should be. Now, if you're trying to launch a business or scale, you need to be thinking about what that equates to as an hourly rate. Okay, and when you divide 42 grand into a 40-hour week, say, it works out to about £20 per hour. And when you know that, and you know it's £20 an hour, what you need to be thinking about is doing as many tasks that are at least 10 times that amount, that produce 10 times that amount. So I've seen people trying to get ahead by posting lots of their own social media content, and that is awesome. But if you're in a business and the business produces a profit of more than £20 per hour, then you really need to evaluate what you're doing with your time and what actions you're prioritizing. Okay, because if you're spending a whole day doing £20 an hour tasks, you're not only going to limit your growth, but you're going to burn out. And also, you're basically saying to yourself, you're not worth more than £20 an hour. I'm going to do this myself because I don't feel like I'm worth more than £20 an hour. I don't want to pay someone to do it. I'm going to do it. And you're basically saying you're not worth more than £20 an hour. So think about your emails, for instance. If you're replying to all of your emails yourself, okay, you might be answering 100 emails to make a sale, okay? And an email might take you 3 minutes. So if you've got a £300 product, for instance, those emails are basically £60 per hour work. Okay, so if you're spending 3 minutes to do an email and you're doing 100 emails to make a sale, then that email equates to £60 per hour work. All right. Then if you think about social media, let's say that you've got 100 followers and you have a little link that they can go to every week, and you get 10 of that 100 to click the link, and then out of that 10 you get one of them to buy your product. And let's say your product's £300. Well, that will work out to a £45 per week action. Now, it takes you 30 minutes to do the Instagram post or the social media post, and you're spending in total 3.5 hours per week over those 7 days. And if you divide that £45 into that, then that works out to £12 per hour. And what's more, it's actually stopping you from doing the high profit actions that you need to be focusing on to scale. Because the time that you're doing that, you're losing money doing higher profit tasks. So in other words, you're going to be stunted, massively stunted. You're seriously going to cap your ability to scale, and you're going to stick at one level forever. And you might be happy in doing what you're doing, and you might be able to work from home, and you might be free, but you will be limited. Your scale will be massively limited, and you'll always find yourself at a certain level, and you'll struggle to get above that. So you need to be focusing on 10 times that GDP, which is about £200 per hour work minimum. So if you spend 20 hours per week working on your side hustle, for instance, and you've got 20 hours because you've got a job and you got sleep as well, right? But in that time you create a product or a service and learn a skill, well then that would be £200 per hour, okay? Times 20, that's £4,000 per week, which is 200 grand per year. Now you'd have to take out tax and overheads and associated costs with creating that product, but over the year, let's just say it's 100 grand. Okay, that's 100 grand. So that's much, much more than the GDP. It's more than double. Now, if you only did 10 hours per week, okay, instead of the 20 hours per week, that would bring it down to 50 grand per year. Okay, and that would be much harder to scale, wouldn't it? I mean, it's not really enough. You'd burn out because you'd be doing all of your job, you'd be building the hustle to generate 50k, and you kind of will be on that threshold of, I don't know if this is worth my time or my sanity, or and you end up going mad. So it drastically affects that. Now, if you did only 10 hours and £100 per hour work instead of the £200 per hour work, then that's 25 grand per year. So that's just not worth it. Not worth putting in all that work because you've lowered the value of the tasks that you're doing. Okay? So £200 per hour is the absolute minimum. And you want to be asking yourself, what is this task worth to me in over a 3-year GDP, right? Return. What is this worth to me as over a 3-year period? What is the return on me doing this task over being the visionary and creating amazing products? And speaking of products, right? So let's just say that you outsource your social media to someone for $10 per hour, okay, who's much better at it than you. And you outsource your emails to someone who's much better at it than you for $20 an hour, say. And you get to work on your product, the product of your vision, okay? And you spend 10 hours of your time planning and videoing and producing a series of videos for a course, okay? Now, to get to that 10 hours of content, it might take you 3 times that. Let's just say 30 hours, okay? Now, imagine you had 1,000 followers. Right now, you've got 1,000 followers because you've been focused on putting out your true message out there and, letting someone amplify your social media for you for $10 an hour. And let's just say that you have 200 of those in a subscription service. Out of that 1,000, you've got 200 of those in a subscription service paying you £50 a month, okay, for your Facebook group or a mastermind network group that you've put together, right? That's 10 grand a month, which is very conservative numbers, by the way, okay? And then out of that, you're charging £500 for the course, okay? And each month, 10% of your group buy that course, okay? That's another £10,000 per month. And that's without even growing, okay? So just a snapshot of 1,000 followers, 200 people in a group, £500 course, you're doing 20 grand per month. Okay, that's a return of 240 grand a year, or over a 3-year period, £720,000 over a 3-year period. Almost, best part of £1 million over a 3-year period. Now, when you work out the hourly rate on that, it took you 30 hours to produce that. That's £24,000 per hour work. Okay, so think about that. And I encourage you to weigh up how you're prioritizing your tasks and ask yourself, what's the best use of my time? How can I scale and not get into the trap of feeling busy and productive instead of being a visionary and being inspired? Because that's when you're going to create growth. That's when you're going to scale. That's when you're going to weigh a lot, right? That's when your weighing machine becomes valuable. That's when you stand the test of time, you break out through the noise, and you provide more value than anyone else you know to the world. And that's when you'll appreciate true wealth and financial independence. So I hope you got something from this week, guys. I hope it made the brain cogs turn, and I hope that you it gets you into thinking, how can I live my most inspired life, right? That's what this podcast is all about. It's about choosing how you spend your time and focusing on what inspires you rather than living a busy life full of things that, full of low cost tasks. That's it for this week, guys. If you enjoyed it, like it, review it, share it around, and until next time, have a great rest of your day and weekend, and I'll see you then.
Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.